My girlfriend lied about being pregnant to trap me after I supported her through school, so I exposed everything, and now her family wants my forgiveness. I'm a 27-year-old guy, and for most of my life, I believed trust and loyalty were everything in a relationship. I've always thought that if you truly care about someone, you'd go out of your way to support them, even if it meant sacrificing a little of yourself. That's how I ended up with Hannah. She was finishing her final year of college, buried in student loans, living paycheck to paycheck, and I genuinely wanted to make things easier for her. I covered her tuition when she fell behind, helped with rent, paid for groceries, and even picked up the occasional unexpected bills she didn't feel comfortable asking her parents for. Every time she smiled and whispered, "Thank you," I felt proud, like I was finally doing the right thing by someone I loved. But then, little cracks started showing. She would step out of the room during phone calls, speaking in hushed tones, sometimes disappearing for hours, and coming back with vague excuses about study groups or errands. At first, I told myself it was normal. Maybe she needed space, or I was just being paranoid. Friends, though, weren't so easily convinced. "She seems a little too dependent on you, man," one of them said casually, over beers one night. I laughed it off. "Nah, you don't get it. She's struggling, I'm just helping. That's what a relationship is." I wanted to believe them, I really did. Still, the tension in the back of my mind grew like a quiet storm. She started dropping hints about big news that would change everything, her eyes lighting up with that mischievous, secretive glimmer. When she said it, I felt my chest tighten, not with suspicion, but excitement. Was this something wonderful? Something life-changing? I didn't know yet, but the feeling of anticipation hung in the air like static before a lightning strike. And just like that, I was hooked. I was ready to support her through whatever was coming, not realizing that the foundation I had built my trust on was about to be tested in ways I could never imagine. I couldn't stop thinking about what Hannah's big news could be. Every text notification made my heart race. Every message from her felt like a small jolt of anticipation. I started imagining our future together, moving into a proper apartment, planning trips, maybe even talking about engagement one day. In my mind, we were unstoppable, a team that could take on anything life threw at us. I even started budgeting differently, making room for her tuition payments and little luxuries she didn't ask for, but I wanted her to have. The more I gave, the more I convinced myself I was building the life we both deserved. But the tension kept growing. Hannah started asking me to rearrange my schedule to help her with projects or accompany her to appointments. And while it seemed innocent, I noticed she'd always get a little defensive when I asked why she couldn't handle certain things on her own. There were subtle hints of secrecy, phone calls she left on speaker, a nervous glance when I walked in, texts that she quickly hid. My friends noticed too. "Dude, she's controlling your time," one said, half joking. I laughed it off again, insisting, "She's stressed, that's all. She needs me right now." I didn't want to see the cracks forming, so I doubled down, taking extra shifts at work to cover more of her bills and adjusting my weekends to be at her side. She thanked me endlessly, brushing her fingers over mine and smiling in a way that made me feel like I was the most important person in the world. But in the back of my mind, a tiny seed of doubt had been planted, whispering that maybe I was giving too much, that maybe something felt off. Then one evening, as we sat in her cramped apartment surrounded by stacks of books and papers, she looked at me with that secretive grin again. "I can't wait to tell you," she said softly, her eyes sparkling with excitement. "It's going to change everything. You're going to be so proud." I smiled back, heart pounding, feeling both exhilarated and nervous, completely unaware that the storm was quietly gathering just beneath the surface. A few days later, Hannah finally sat me down, her hands trembling slightly as she fidgeted with the edge of her notebook. I think I might be pregnant," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. My chest tightened instantly, a mix of shock and excitement flooding me all at once. I wanted to hug her, tell her everything was going to be okay, and reassure her that we would get through it together. Deep down, I felt proud, like all my sacrifices had built a safe foundation for something bigger, something permanent. I promised her I'd be there every step of the way, ready to support her emotionally, financially, and in every way I could. Almost immediately, the dynamic shifted. She started giving me lists of appointments and asking me to cover various medical payments. Each request made me feel more needed, more essential, and I didn't even question it. But small inconsistencies began creeping in. She'd claim a test came back late, then suddenly needed to reschedule a checkup, or she'd say the doctor wanted to discuss something privately but wouldn't give details. I tried to brush it off, telling myself it was just normal delays, normal stress, normal confusion. My friends, however, were no longer subtle about their warnings. "Man, something doesn't feel right," one said. "She's manipulating you." I laughed it off, insisting, "You don't get it. She's struggling. I'm just doing what a good partner does." Still, the anxiety gnawed at me. Every text that went unanswered for too long, every phone call she stepped out to take, set my mind racing. I couldn't tell if it was worry for her or fear that something was off. And then, one night, she looked at me, smiling but with an odd glimmer in her eye, and said, "Once this is all settled, everything we've dreamed of can finally happen." My stomach twisted. The words were sweet, but something about them felt calculated, like a secret she wasn't ready to share. I wanted to trust her completely, to believe in the life we were building, but the first real doubts had finally started to pierce through. That tiny seed of suspicion began to grow quietly, waiting for the moment it would bloom into something I couldn't ignore. Over the next few weeks, my entire life started revolving around Hannah. Every free hour, every extra paycheck, every ounce of energy I had went into making her feel secure, cared for, and supported. I took time off work to accompany her to appointments, stayed up late researching pregnancy tips, and even rearranged my weekends just to be with her. I told myself it was worth it. After all, this was our future we were building, wasn't it? Her smile, the way she'd squeeze my hand and whisper, "I don't know what I'd do without you," made me feel like I was doing the right thing, that every sacrifice mattered. And yet, something in the back of my mind nagged at me, an unshakable whisper that I tried to ignore. Hannah's behavior began changing subtly, too. She'd check her phone obsessively, step out mid-conversation, or brush off questions with vague answers. She wasn't rude, not exactly, but there was this tension, a shadow behind her expressions that made me uneasy. Friends noticed, too. "Bro, she's making you bend over backwards," one said during a night out. "Are you sure she's being honest with you?" I waved them off, defensive. "You don't get it. She's overwhelmed, that's all. I need to be there for her." I told myself their concerns were jealousy, that no one understood the bond we had. Even as doubt crept in, Hannah continued manipulating the emotional narrative perfectly. She'd hint at how difficult it would be to navigate this pregnancy without my support, subtly weaving guilt and appreciation together so I'd never question her. I caught myself daydreaming about our life after the baby, the apartment, our trips, the stability I thought we were creating. And yet, with every sacrifice, every sleepless night, every dollar spent, the tiniest shred of uncertainty started growing. Then, one night, as rain streaked down the windows and the apartment smelled faintly of her old textbooks and coffee, Hannah leaned close and whispered, "Once this is all over, you're going to realize how lucky you are to be with me." Her eyes gleamed with something I couldn't place, hope, excitement, or something darker. I wanted to believe her, but my chest tightened with the first real pangs of fear that I might be too invested to see what was coming. It started small at first, a text I happened to see from an old friend of hers, a message that seemed oddly casual, almost flirty. I didn't want to believe it, so I shoved the feeling aside, telling myself I was overreacting. But little inconsistencies began piling up everywhere. She would claim to have gone to a doctor's appointment, then casually mention seeing a friend at the same time. She'd cancel plans with vague excuses, and then post photos online that contradicted her stories. My friends started noticing too. "Dude, this isn't normal. Something's off," one said, his voice low, serious. I argued, defended her endlessly. "No, you don't get it. She's stressed, that's all. I'm just helping her." But the seed of doubt had taken root. I found myself watching her every move, listening for the tone in her voice, memorizing patterns, trying to reconcile the woman I loved with the strange gaps in her stories. And the more I searched for answers, the more I started noticing patterns in the appointments, the hidden calls, the way she avoided explaining details about her supposed medical tests. I tried confronting her gently, masking my suspicion behind care. "Are you sure everything's okay?" I asked one evening, voice soft, hoping for reassurance. She smiled, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. Of course, baby. Why would you doubt me? Even then, she subtly made me feel guilty for questioning her. Her hands on mine, her soft voice, her eyes, it all worked like a trap. I felt torn, like I couldn't live without her approval, but couldn't shake the gnawing anxiety in my gut. And then one night, she leaned in close, whispering with a mischievous glint I hadn't seen before. You'll see soon, everything we've planned is finally falling into place. My stomach twisted. Something about the way she said it felt calculated, precise, like she was holding back a secret I wasn't ready to uncover. I wanted to trust her completely, but the first real cracks of doubt had begun to widen into something I couldn't ignore, and I had no idea just how far this lie would go. I wish I could say the doubt stayed small, that I ignored it, and everything turned out fine. But one evening, curiosity got the better of me. I was looking through some old emails she'd left open on her laptop, something I'd never done before, and I froze. There it was, clear as day, medical records, and not the kind you'd expect for a pregnancy. There were no ultrasound images, no blood test confirmations, nothing. Hannah had never been pregnant. My heart slammed against my ribs as the words hit me. I had been supporting, sacrificing, and rearranging my entire life for a lie. I felt my stomach drop, a wave of nausea and disbelief washing over me. How could someone do this? How could someone take everything I gave them, everything I trusted them with, and twist it into a trap? I scrolled through her texts, piecing together the manipulation, messages to friends about how I was gullible, about how easy it was to get me to pay for her tuition, rent, and groceries. The realization hit me like a freight train. She had weaponized my loyalty. Every smile, every whisper of thanks, every tear I thought I was comforting had been calculated. When she walked into the room, oblivious to what I had discovered, I felt a mix of rage and heartbreak, so intense it was physical. Hey babe, what's wrong? She asked, smiling. I swallowed hard, my voice tight. How long were you planning on keeping this up? My hands were shaking, my chest burning. She froze for a second, just long enough for me to see something. Panic, maybe guilt, or maybe a flicker of her manipulative calm. I realized then that everything I thought was real had been a performance. My trust, my sacrifices, my sleepless nights, they had been used as a weapon against me. That night, I sat alone in the dim light of her apartment, listening to the quiet hum of the fridge, the distant sounds of the city, feeling a betrayal so deep I could barely breathe. And I knew one thing. I couldn't stay silent anymore. Something had to be done, or I would lose everything I had worked for. The next few days were a blur of anger, disbelief, and a strange clarity I hadn't felt before. I couldn't just confront Hannah blindly. I had to be smart. Every text, every email, every transaction I had covered for her, I documented it all. I saved screenshots, copied bank statements, and pieced together a timeline of her lies. I didn't tell anyone yet, not my friends, not her family, not even myself fully. This was going to be precise. When I saw her the next day, she tried to act normal, smiling like nothing had changed. Hey, I've got a surprise for you, she said, leaning against the doorframe. But I wasn't fooled. I stayed calm, watching her like a hawk. Her little quirks, the way she checked her phone too often, the way she hesitated mid-sentence, suddenly made sense. Everything I had ignored before clicked into place. Every little lie, every manipulation, every thank you I had believed. It had all been a calculated trap. I started confiding in my closest friends, carefully, showing them just enough evidence to make them understand without alerting her. She's been lying about the pregnancy this whole time, I whispered, voice tight, my hands shaking. They looked at me, stunned. Dude, that's insane. You need to do something. I nodded. I realized I had two choices: stay angry and let her continue, or take control and make sure everyone saw the truth. I began planning the confrontation, thinking through every possible reaction, every angle, every way she could try to manipulate the narrative back onto me. I wanted it public enough that there would be no room for doubt, no way she could spin it. Every text, every bill she had made me pay, every appointment she faked, everything was going to be on the table. And as I sat in my car that night, the city lights blurred through the windshield, I felt a cold, electric determination settle in. I wasn't just going to confront her. I was going to expose everything. And there was no going back. The day of the confrontation arrived, and I felt my chest tighten like it was going to explode. I asked Hannah to meet me at her family's living room. Neutral territory, with witnesses, but I had no idea how she would react. When she walked in, smiling nervously, my stomach twisted. I didn't say a word at first. I simply placed the folder of evidence on the coffee table, letting it speak for itself. Texts, screenshots, bank records, emails, all laid bare. Her eyes widened as she realized I wasn't bluffing. What is all this?" she stammered, voice trembling. I stayed calm, letting the silence drag for a beat. The only sounds the hum of the ceiling fan and our uneven breathing. "You lied?" I said softly, each word deliberate. "You weren't pregnant. Everything you've told me, every tear, every thank you, every sacrifice I made, it was all a lie." Her hands flew to her mouth. I could see the panic flicker across her face. "No, you don't understand." She began, but I cut her off, voice rising just enough to be heard over the silence. Her family froze, watching the scene unfold. Some were shocked, some angry at me, and a few looked like they suspected the truth but couldn't believe it. "I trusted you," I said, my voice cracking with a mix of fury and heartbreak. "I supported you, sacrificed for you, and you used me." Her pleas bounced off the walls. She accused me of overreacting, of humiliating her. But the evidence spoke louder than words. By the time I left that room, my hands were shaking, my chest tight, and my head spinning. I felt every emotion all at once: betrayal, rage, exhaustion. The house felt colder, quieter, like the air itself was judging me. I realized that exposing the truth came at a cost. I had stripped away the fantasy I had been living in, and the aftermath would be brutal. But for the first time, I felt free. And I knew the fallout was only just beginning. After the confrontation, I thought maybe it would be over. That maybe, once the truth was out, Hannah and her family would accept it and move on. I couldn't have been more wrong. Within hours, her parents were calling me nonstop, texts, emails, even showing up at my apartment. "You have to forgive her," her mother pleaded, voice tight with desperation. "She made a mistake. We never meant for this to happen like this." Her father added in a clipped, almost angry tone, "You can't just throw away years of love and commitment over a misunderstanding." Every message, every phone call, felt like a punch to my chest. My friends told me to block them, to stay firm, but part of me still hoped someone in that family would understand what had happened. I spent hours replaying every moment, every dollar I'd given, every late night I spent worrying about her, and it hit me hard. My loyalty had been weaponized. Even her family seemed willing to excuse the manipulation just because it benefited them socially or emotionally. I started questioning everything. Was I overreacting? Should I just forgive them, keep the peace, and move on quietly? But the gnawing feeling of betrayal wouldn't let me. I remembered her eyes when she whispered that she was pregnant, the way she smiled at my sacrifices, the way she made me feel proud and needed. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't an accident. It was calculated. By the end of the day, I sat alone in my car, rain streaking the windshield, the city lights blurred and shimmering, feeling the weight of everything pressing down on me. Her family's calls kept coming, her messages pinged relentlessly, and I felt trapped between the anger, the heartbreak, and the absurdity of the situation. And as I gripped the steering wheel, I realized something. I couldn't let them manipulate me any longer. The exposure had been just the beginning. I knew I had to take control before her family's pressure became unbearable. I decided to make everything public, but carefully, strategically. I reached out to mutual friends, shared the timeline, the messages, the financial records, and the screenshots that proved everything. Slowly, the pieces fell into place for everyone. Her lies, her manipulation, every tear I had comforted her through, it was all laid bare, undeniable. I stayed calm during it all, letting the evidence speak louder than any argument she could make. When she realized what I was doing, panic spread across her face like wildfire. "You can't do this," she screamed during one confrontation, voice cracking. I simply nodded, holding up my phone. "I already have. Everyone knows now. This isn't about revenge, it's about truth." Her friends were shocked, some in disbelief, some whispering in hushed tones, confirming what I had feared. She had been lying for months. Her social credibility crumbled before my eyes, and even her family couldn't spin it to defend her anymore. I didn't need to yell. I didn't need to fight. I didn't need to retaliate beyond showing the facts. The exposure was enough. The comments, the whispers, the shock, it all worked in my favor. For the first time in months, I felt a strange sense of relief wash over me. I hadn't just protected myself. I had reclaimed my dignity, my peace, and my sense of reality. That night, I sat in my apartment, lights dim, listening to the distant hum of the city, and finally felt like I could breathe again. The betrayal was behind me now, out in the open, and there was nothing left to manipulate or hide. For the first time in a long time, I realized that the most powerful revenge doesn't come from anger. It comes from taking control and letting the truth speak for itself. After everything, I finally had space to breathe. No calls, no messages, no manipulations, just quiet. I spent hours replaying everything in my head, from the first tuition payment I covered to the moment I discovered the truth. It was painful, humiliating even, but I also realized something important. I had survived it. I had faced betrayal, deception, and emotional manipulation head-on, and I hadn't broken. That in itself felt like a victory. I reflected on the lessons I had learned. Blind loyalty, no matter how well-intentioned, can be exploited. Trust is earned, not demanded, and giving too much too soon can leave you vulnerable. I thought about how her family had tried to pressure me, and I felt proud that I had held firm. I hadn't given in. I hadn't allowed them to rewrite the story. I had exposed the truth and reclaimed my dignity. The fallout from the exposure continued for a few days. Friends and acquaintances reached out to validate my side, expressing shock and sympathy. Hannah tried calling, begging for another chance, tears in her voice, but I blocked her. I realized that forgiveness in this case wasn't a gift I needed to give. It was a manipulation she would use to her advantage. I didn't know her or her family anything. I also began rebuilding my life, piece by piece. I started saving again, focusing on work, reconnecting with friends I had neglected, and investing in relationships that felt genuine. The weight of manipulation and betrayal slowly lifted, replaced by confidence and clarity. For the first time in months, I felt like myself again, fully in control, no longer a pawn in someone else's game. And while the scars of what happened would stay with me, they served as a reminder of strength. I had survived, exposed the lies, and reclaimed my life. For once, I knew that self-respect and boundaries were far more valuable than blind trust. I finally cut every remaining tie with Hannah and her family. No calls, no texts, no half-hearted apologies. I blocked them all. It felt strange at first, the silence almost deafening after months of chaos, but within it, I found clarity. For the first time in a long time, I could think without guilt, without manipulation twisting my thoughts. I started rebuilding, not just my finances, but my sense of self, my confidence, and my emotional boundaries. Every day felt like reclaiming a piece of my life that had been stolen. I realized the power I had forgotten I possessed. I had been loyal, trusting, and patient, but I had also been strong. I had faced deception and betrayal head-on, without compromising my integrity. Walking away, fully aware and fully in control, was the ultimate victory. Hannah and her family could try to rewrite the story, beg for forgiveness, or plead for understanding, but none of it mattered anymore. I had already won the most important battle, my peace. Rebuilding my relationships became a priority. Friends I had pushed aside for her now felt like anchors, reminding me of who I really was. I threw myself into projects, hobbies, and work that made me feel accomplished, independent, and respected. Each small victory reinforced a truth I had ignored for far too long. Self-respect isn't negotiable. Trust must be earned, not leveraged. And loyalty is meaningless if it's exploited. Looking back, I understand how blind love made me vulnerable, but I also see it as a lesson rather than a failure. I've grown, I've healed, and I've learned to recognize manipulation before it takes root. And though the betrayal still stings sometimes, I can face the world confidently, knowing that I am no longer a pawn in someone else's game. For the first time in months, I smiled quietly to myself, sitting in my apartment with the city lights glimmering outside. The past was behind me, the lies were exposed, and my life was finally mine.